Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. Welcome back. And yes, after a brief hiatus of other guest hosts, I'm back in the chair. This is Brother Mushtaq for the Happy Strong Family weekly live stream coming at you every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And to my right, we have Dr. Zaihan Rashid. And today we're going to be discussing the widening family crisis. And I know you and I were discussing off air already some of the work, voluntary work you were doing just even yesterday. So, how do you want to start this off? Let me mention for the audience the topics up front so that you keep watching. This is a must watch for any and all parents, and I'll mention that up front. Topics to be covered: the widening gap in alienation between parents and children. And then two, the overall topic would be the potential of our children being emotionally weak husbands, fathers, wives, mothers in the future. Interesting. So, Dr. Zaihan, over to you, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, Jazakallah khair, Brother Mushtaq, for inviting me to talk about this topic that's very dear to my heart. The entire organization called Happy Strong Family sprung into its reality once it became apparent that it's not our economic future that's under threat. It's not our physical health only that are being affected by the COVID virus. And it's not just the fact that prices have generally gone up and therefore people are a bit more stressed, but I wanted to emphasize the crisis that's inside the home versus what's happening outside the home. Because I do think when people have been trained and conditioned and almost convinced to say, if I can take care of the outside, somehow the inside will become better. Well, that's a bit like doing makeup while you've got untreated cancer.
Right.
So to me, therefore, the issue of a family, and not just a family of people that live in the same house, people that eat on the same table, maybe people that are biologically related, but people that are truly in the essence looking after the ability to do good for each other. Meaning, I divide family themes into three major themes.
Okay.
What are the purposes of a family? What could be the purposes of family? Well, the first thing I think a family, and this is not necessarily just a Muslim family, in case some of our audience are not Muslim, the idea here is the family nurtures the fitra or the essence of the human being, which is good.
Okay.
Meaning the desire to do good is inbuilt inside us.
Right.
And I believe that if this is nurtured and is taken care of, then it is like a seed that will flourish and will become a strong tree. And therefore, once this fitra, this innate nature is nurtured, taken care of, then it will develop this individual into somebody who will be able to do the next thing, which is the psychological health of the individual.
Okay.
And we've all seen how this issue of mental illnesses, if you like, things like anxiety, things like depression, things like people that are uncertain about who they are, the obsessed. I mean, there's a whole range of names. I'm not a psychologist and I'm not going to pretend to be one, but I do see that a fair amount of this unwellness of the self is coming from the inability of the family to support the fitra, the nature of the human being, which is good to begin with.
Right.
But because it was ignored, or perhaps it was ill-treated, or maybe it wasn't nurtured, the water wasn't put in, the topsoil didn't come in, the sun wasn't always there, and the weeds weren't taken out at the time, then this fitra became clouded with all the things that it's potentially able to be clouded by.
Okay.
So the second thing, first thing is the nurturing of the fitra or the innate goodness. Second is the psychological well-being of the person. Now, what do I mean by that? By that, I mean the ability to function as a decent human being in the society.
Yes.
I cannot expect us to be good husbands, good mothers, wonderful fathers, and beautiful mothers or wives if that innate goodness has not nurtured the psychological wellness. Where I, for example, as a man, I'm capable of looking after the interests of people that are weaker than me,
Mm.
people that are less qualified than me,
Right.
people that may not be at the same level of knowledge as I might think I am. I'm
Mm.
not, but I'm just saying, if I was to suppose myself at a higher level of understanding, then I would have the humility to say, but this individual is under my wing.
Right.
Allah has given me, God has given me the responsibility to let this person develop the confidence that I want them to have.
Yes.
If they become weak fathers and poor husbands, aren't they going to affect the society that we live in?
Right. Right.
Is it not the case that it will lead to the next generation suffering the consequences of this individual not really delivering
Oh,
or
absolutely.
performing?
It becomes a cycle.
And so the third thing I think from there is the ability to defend values and morals that we stand for,
Mm.
meaning the worldview that me and us as Muslims hold. And that's not necessarily something isolated to the Muslims. It's decency, it's reliability,
Mm.
it's dependency, it's the ability to give more than the ability to, or want to take. It's the fulfilling of the responsibilities before the demanding of the rights. It's all of those things. So I think when the audience might be thinking, oh, this is a very Islamic narrative, actually, it's not. It's the narrative of every, I think, civilized society that wants to offer the best that it has to offer to the world.
Mm.
So I think that sets the stage for what I have in mind today.
Okay, okay, okay. So then, Dr. Zaihan, where do we go from here? I mean, you've touched on a number of topics, right? Well-being, trauma, right? A cycle of unhealthy parenting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So where does one let's deconstruct this. Let's unbox this
Sure.
from your point of view. What what advice can you give to our viewers then? How can they understand this better so that they can apply it in their own lives?
Jazakallah khair. I think that is very important. Uh, I believe the prioritization of things would be the first step.
Okay.
Like everything else, we all have priorities. We all want to have certain values. These are nice words. But if rhetoric is to be translated to action, then a plan has to be put into place.
Yes.
And we have to be clear in our ideas of what do we want to offer our children. My meaning, are we outsourcing the very essence of what is tarbiyah? So now to parenting, to any kind of, if you like, education, or even if you like, apprenticeship, there's
Mm.
an element of education, and then there's an element of what we consider training or hands-on role modeling.
Mm.
I believe, Brother Mushtaq, one of the big things we have to re-look at is our roles as fathers, as mothers, and not to look at shuyukh on the net, which a lot of us have started to look at, to say, oh, sheikh this and sheikh that says this. That's absolutely true. But I want to remind myself and remind my brothers and sisters, both in humanity and in Islam, who are watching, role modeling is more powerful than anything that you can ever teach your child. And the idea in my mind is a father should become the person he wants the son to be,
Mm.
or his daughter or his mother to be, meaning that children see parents that respect each other. They respect each other unconditionally.
Yes.
They respect the children unconditionally. The respect of the child does not depend on things like high marks or memorization of the Quran or performance of the Salah or even some other characteristic, because then it becomes conditional. And conditional respect is very difficult to justify in the long term,
Mm.
because the child then or a young person does not see the value of their humanity, of their individuality. What they see is certain sets of things that a father or mother is trying to impose upon them.
Right.
So if I can bring in that point only to say, instead of imposition, try and bring conviction. The child or the person is convinced that this is the right thing to do. Meaning, it's one thing to know, and it's one other thing to believe and perform.
Right.
So,
Right.
which, in other words, I think for some of us, it's internalization of a value. And that, I believe, Brother Mushtaq, is a lifelong process. I do not believe that it can be, classed into some, okay, in 10 years, I have to do this.
Mm.
But I can remind all of us, because I've seen that in my own life, that what you preach is not as powerful as what you actually practice.
Okay.
So
Yes.
practice, therefore, is going to become much more powerful. And if I can use even more simpler terms, the child listens with their eyes.
Mm.
And what that will imply is your and my words may fail, but your and my action will very likely have a deep ingrained effect. So, the first point I would like to make here is to change the narrative in the house is to look at the self as the person you want the child to be. That might not be easy always.
Right.
It might sometimes sound very difficult. It might also be the case that I indeed want my son to do things that I'm not yet doing.
Yes.
Well, that's all the more reason. I want to give a small example. Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh. At one time, he was the Imam of Medina, and as you know, he's the second great Imam. And his confinement was to Medina. He never left Medina for any length of time. So at one time, he was asked by one of his congregants to ask people to release slaves, manumite them. And Imam Malik did not do that in his Jummah khutbahs, which is what the implication was. After many months, one day he did say in his khutbah, release the slaves, because that's what is encouraged by the Quran and it's encouraged by the Prophet ﷺ. And so indeed people did start to immediately respond and start releasing slaves in huge numbers. And so then at that time, the same man who had asked Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi, he came and said, why didn't you say this so many months ago when I first advised you? Look at the huge effect it had.
Right.
And Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi said, I did not have a slave at the time. And I did not want to preach something that I had not done myself. Now, that's obviously a very high standard. I don't believe most of us will have that standard. I mean, I'm not saying nobody will do. I'm talking about myself first. So the promotion of good deeds is not a bad thing. The promotion of a good value with the recognition that I'm not yet there should not stop me. So parents should not say to themselves, but I'm not there. I don't get up for Fajr. How can I encourage little Ahmad or little Fatma to do it? But my encouragement would be get little Ahmad to get you up.
Right.
So do a collective and use that as an opportunity to say, you know what? We all need to learn. Another thing which I see very commonly, and I'm going to stop in a minute and let you ask if there's anything you want to clarify on this. But the second thing I see very much is when parents feel that they cannot ever say that they do not know. Because we do not have Encyclopedia Britannica or the modern version of it, Mr. Google, in our heads. We don't. Right. So instead of madly searching for an answer or to look authentic when clearly you are not, it's so much more human if we accept, I'm so happy that you asked me that question. Actually, I never thought of that question myself.
Right.
I now have an opportunity to go and research. I will get back to you.
Right. So just to kind of, recap more than anything.
So the simple terms, I think if I could say it in 2 sentences,
yes.
It's the 10-minute rhetoric.
Please.
A, role modeling.
Got it.
This could be politeness in language. This could be smiling more.
Yes.
This could be helping with housework. This could be not ignoring people because I'm tired or hungry. It could just still be practicing some very basic rituals like salam, for example.
Right.
Like asking each other how their day was. This does not have to be practiced in a big way. I mean, it's practiced in our offices every day.
Yes.
So I think if we can do those simple things, and I advise myself and all of us, start simple. Don't try and come from a very high level. Accept your humility and accept that you're a student of knowledge and that you're learning and that you love your kids, whether they're little or whether they're not so little. Once the youngsters get the feeling we're all in this together, it's really quite surprising how much they will help you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll one example kind of comes to mind right now, Dr. Zaihan, and that is I was attending a wedding very recently. And you know how a lot of parents nowadays do, they'll get on stage and they'll talk about their son or their daughter. And so this person clearly said, oh, I love my son. And, he too has been now focusing on wellness and mindfulness and all of these, which maybe a generation ago, parents of his age bracket never did. Right. Yeah. So he was so, he became so emotional about all of this. One time he literally his son came home and he said to his son, and again, this is him retelling this story at a wedding, no less, right? It's a very large gathering. We're all listening to this story. And he tells the crowd, so I told my son I love him. And his son immediately looked at the mom and said, is that okay? So when you say, become a better role model, and, for any one parent, yes, they don't have all the right answers. But let me frame it this way. and I'm kind of borrowing a
Sure.
saying from the corporate world,
Sure.
imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
I still feel I'm not the best parent. I know I'm not the best parent. I know there's more things I can definitely do. Even as I was picking up my youngest daughter and my son from tutoring just now before coming to the podcast, I had a very deep discussion with my son. He doesn't like English. Okay, he doesn't like language. Math is his strong suit. Alhamdulillah. Being very hands-on and technical. We put together, we installed a new Nest thermostat in the house.
Okay.
And he watched a video for all of, maybe 10 seconds. He's like, Baba, do this. And he was very hands-on. He actually wired it. I just basically screwed in the template. He wired it, installed it. And I'm like, wow, alhamdulillah, for a 13-year-old, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So I understand where you're coming from, Dr. Zaihan, that, as parents, we need to step up.
Yeah.
Right. We need to be that role model. But if there is, if we don't have that solid ground ourselves, if we don't have that strong foundation ourselves, then give us some advice there. Like what can we as parents do? And as we've been saying in many past episodes, yes, we need to connect with our children before we correct them. So, but then how can we provide that solid footing in our own kind of view of the world and how from that we can then become hopefully a better parent?
Jazakallah. Again, I think a very pointed and a very poignant question. I think one thing which I alluded to in the beginning was to have a student of knowledge attitude about things. And to not be shy of admitting that one is in a learning phase and that learning really does not ever stop. There is at no point in time when we will become perfect. This, in fact, I think is a very, how can I put it, a very successful ploy that is used to procrastinate. I am not the perfect parent. I do not do all the things that I should do. I was not the same person that I am now. He is only my age. He cannot be functioning like me. The idea here is never that we are expecting somebody to become perfect, but the idea is to have a high goal and ambition. After all, what do corporate people do? Don't they want to get to the top? I mean, I haven't met anybody in my profession where somebody said, I'm content with just making this amount of money. People are always trying to get higher.
Right.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it, provided it does not interfere with the other very higher goals, which are to say, as Ibrahim Adham Rahmatullah alayh, he once said, prepare for things for the length of time you intend to spend where you are. Right. So if in the matters of the world, the average age, as the Prophet ﷺ has told us, 60 to 70, he said, prepare for it. Right. But he said, for the world that is going to come forever, appropriately prepare for that too.
Yes.
I don't think we should be shy in saying to anybody, our youngsters included, look, son, a lot of things have come in since I was your age. A lot of things I have learned since I grew up. I want you to benefit from my experience, not necessarily from my practice.
Right.
Meaning, I may not have been doing all of this, but look, I didn't have Facebook. That didn't stop you. I didn't have access to all the gadgets that you have access to. I could never have picked up a hadith and Googled it and got it right there. I didn't have that ability.
Right.
So just like your ability, your knowledge increases, your ability ought to also come up. I also wanted to give an example of Handala, a Sahabi, who came out of his home and said he has become a munafiq. He's become a hypocrite. And he was saying that loudly to the point where Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu actually noticed. And he said, why do you call yourself a munafiq? So Handala is not some regular guy. Handala is one of the Sahaba that actually was considered Ghasil al-Malaika. He was given a shower after his death by angels. So this is not somebody that could be expected to have that kind of personality. And he said, the reason I say this is because when I'm with the Prophet ﷺ, I am at a very high spiritual level. But when I come home and my wife sends me to Freshco for the milk, I don't feel that high spirituality. Abu Bakr then said, I feel the same. Both arrive in front of Muhammad ﷺ and put the question to him, because that's how questions were dealt with those days.
Right.
And the Prophet ﷺ said, indeed, when you're with me, you are at that level. But if you were to stay at that level all the time, angels would shake hands with you in the streets, which means don't expect yourself to be always at a high level. I think if we share those things with our children and indicate that we are also work in progress and that we are not by any means people who have reached and are solid, then I think we open the doors for improvement for all of us as a family.
Love it, love it. A work in progress. Very good, very well said, very well said. I know producer Kashif has already put on the screen here in the studio that we have questions from the audience. So, producer Kashif, let's get to that. Let's hear your booming voice on the microphone, please.
Yes, Jazakallah khair. So the comment, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah, was looking forward to Dr. Rashid's session. So Jazakallah khair. So the sister is asking the question, as we are learning to overcome the traumas of our past as parents, what self-talk can help us be more graceful and forgiving to ourselves?
Oh, a very pointed question. Okay, okay.
Jazakallah khair. So this is also something that often, I think, almost chases us. It's like old skeletons that just won't let go. And I have to remind myself, we have to remind ourselves that if it is mistakes of the past, then seeking forgiveness means that Allah has already forgiven them. We should assume about Allah the best. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in Hadith Qudsi, Allah becomes the way that you assume of him. So we should, as sinful people, we are all sinful. The Prophet ﷺ said, Kullu bani Adam khata. There's nobody in the world that has not made mistakes. And there's nobody that is courageous enough to admit that they've made mistakes, except a person who, the Prophet ﷺ, one time a Sahabi came and said, Ya Rasulullah, I think of things that are terrible. And the Prophet ﷺ said, how do you feel about it? He said, terrible. He said, that is a state of Iman.
Yeah.
Which means the sister who's asking this question, I'll politely remind her, we are all having skeletons in our cupboards. We all have past that we feel regret about. Right. But we also have to bury the past. We can't be rediscovering things that we are regretful for. We have asked Allah to forgive us. If it's a human being we impinge upon, we've asked him or her for it, and now bury it. And even make dua, Ya Allah, please do not let these things come back to my mind. And if they do come back to your mind, just say astaghfirullah and move on with your life. One very powerful thing, and this is psychology also, the way to move on is to forgive and forget the past. Forgive it and forget it to the best of your ability, obviously.
Right.
But not to let it haunt you for the rest of your time so that it retards your progress, which I think is not the purpose of going forward.
Right.
I hope that answers the question, inshallah.
Yeah, well said, well said. Producer Kashif, another question, please.
Jazakallah khair. So we have a comment here saying, I watched Dr. Rashid on Instagram. I have benefited so much. May Allah reward him and his family.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah, alhamdulillah. Ameen, ameen.
So the next question that was coming in on the live stream was balance between letting children make their own mistakes versus forcing them into a decision. For example, them deciding not to go to university when they are able to.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yes.
Jazakallah khair. Again, a dilemma that many parents have. I would say if you don't have that dilemma, there is probably something that it will probably come to you. Because this idea that we second guess what our children should do.
Right.
And I remind myself, children are a project of their own. And we will not be able to take them by the reins and direct them into this and that. I hope that, and I don't know how old this child, but I'm assuming university age, so it's probably past 16 and 17. That is an age where we have become friends of children, as we were alluding to in our recent podcast. That Ali radiallahu anhu said, he said, children for the first 7 years, play is their education. When they're playing, they're actually educating, they're actually learning. They're actually driving more benefit than any iPhone can ever do for them. Secondly, between the age of 7 and 14, we have all this opportunity in the world to become their teachers.
Right.
And when we are their teachers, we're not just teaching them by books, we're teaching them by example, as we alluded to earlier. And when the age comes from 14 onwards, Islam considered that to be a state of bulugh. You are now baligh, meaning you are now an adult by thinking. You may not be, but the assumption is that you have entered the state where you are in the process of getting to be where you're not going to be. So for the sister or the brother, I think it's a sister, asking this question, I would say, talk with your children more than telling your children. I can't emphasize enough that children, youngsters learn a lot by mukalama, conversation. They learn less from videos. They learn less from, I would say, even shuyukh. Because a father is by nature the child's best teacher. It's only when we relegate this task to or outsource this task to others does the child have to accept other people's. If you so again, this is a topic for some other time. But emotional development, the intellectual confidence that Allah is the one that's running the show, and being completely confident that the child is capable of making correct decisions, even if it means that he or she does not agree with what I want.
Right.
So university education or no university education does not block your child from entering Jannah.
Yes.
Does
Valid
not
point.
stop from
Valid
getting
point.
his book of deeds in his right hand.
Right.
Does not stop him from being forgiven from the azab al-qabr, the punishment of the grave. So therefore, I don't know why this should become such a big issue. Education at the end, and I'm sorry if I'm breaking some people's bubbles, is really economic well-being. It does not give you the confidence of becoming a better husband.
Right.
It has never been known to create a wonderful father. It might do, but it's not the aim of this education.
Right.
And education and qualification, Brother Mushtaq, I believe, are two completely different things.
Agreed.
I've seen extremely qualified people who would be very questioned about, are you educated how to ask somebody to forgive you? Like, it doesn't look like you've really learned that skill, even though you've got 3 PhDs and 2 FRCs in front of your name.
Yeah.
So with politeness and respect to the sister, I would say, if your child is doing all the other things according to the Islamic expectation, meaning he's respectful to you, he does not do things that are displeasing to Allah, he is obeying and he's maintaining his basic Islam, inshallah, make dua for him and have him talk to people.
Right.
It doesn't stop you from allowing him to think. I've seen children, youngsters, who've taken off 2 and 3 years. Some people have gone off and done their hifz of Quran, and they came back and they were excellent with very good memories. They finished there, because people don't just develop because they've got a certain qualification in front of them. They develop by having good sohbah, good company.
Yes.
Sohbat al-salihin, as we say. So if he has good sohbah, and I'm inshallah making dua that he has, then maybe he's benefiting more than any person enclosed in 4 walls that's called the university.
Right. Okay. Well said. Producer Kashif, another question.
Yes, we got a few questions and some comments here. So the comment is, Alhamdulillah, great podcast today, very beneficial. More podcasts needed, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So then we have a question, very specific age and situation here. But it applies to all of us, I think. How does one take a cell phone that a 14-year-old refuses to give for monitoring purposes, or just deal with defiance overall? Or should we let them do whatever they want for peace in the home?
Oh,
this is about digital devices.
Yes.
And again, this comes down to the understanding, first of all, of what kind of relationship exists between the children and the parents. I think people give devices too much importance. I really do. I think these devices take over because there's a lack of connection that would have allowed a good conversation to have taken place. Cell phones, digital devices are very powerful, mesmerizing things. There's no question about it. There's a whole science behind them. They are addicting. They are time consuming. They are very, very powerful instruments. One should not underestimate their ability to do what they're doing.
Right.
So to give somebody a magic box and then to be surprised that they're now affected is like saying, I jumped in the water, but I'm surprised I'm wet.
Yeah.
Well, what would you expect it to be?
Right.
And this is not, please don't take this as derisive or dismissive. Not at all. I'm just saying, first expect and understand the powerful role that these devices have the ability to do. And let's face it, most of us, before we handed these devices to our youngsters, did not really research enough about what we are actually handing out to our children.
Right.
Some of it might have been in the beginning, and I don't know the particular situation, but a lot of the time, Brother Mushtaq, what I've seen is these have basically become things that distract children in the beginning so that we can get on with our life. And that initial distraction then becomes a major addiction over a period of time. So I would say to the sister concerned, please don't, first of all, think that you are alone in this situation. This is a very common situation.
Right.
I would say the first thing to start anything would be a conversation, a makalama. A makalama means that if you are not having a conversation line open with your child, if your bonding is not present, if there is a distance, even before the phone came in, where you were all leading your own lives, and I said that at the beginning politely, to say that emotional well-being depends on the familial environment that exists in the house.
Right.
I'm sure you've seen people that are angry. well, where did this anger come from?
Yeah.
They didn't one fine day decide to let it all loose on people that were, if you like, less qualified than them or younger than them,
Right.
or less capable than them.
Yeah.
It actually happened because that emotional nurturing and well-being was never taken care of to begin with.
Right.
And so when that happens, the person now has weakness which they're now trying to sustain. I understood from somebody that I was watching about video games. I know that's not exactly what the sister is asking, but the video games give to a lot of boys, particularly, the sense of power and control.
Okay.
They finally have the ability to make something do what nobody else seems to be doing.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
Meaning we all want a certain degree of compliance in our life. We all do. I think in the case of parents, this compliance becomes our children also. So a child or a young person cannot be treated as another piece of equipment. They are a living, breathing, thinking human being.
Yeah.
And if they have found these instruments to be more attractive, aside from the fact that the instruments have mesmerizing abilities, I do believe the other reason is the Wi-Fi signal of the parent is weak.
Okay.
Meaning the parent-child bond somewhere has not taken on the strength where the digital device became stronger magnetically, emotionally. It is an emotional connection at the end.
Yeah.
If a child sees this instrument as complying, as fulfilling its desires, and yes, of course, there are a lot of things on there. This is not the podcast for that. But I want our sister to understand, first thing is to have a conversation with the child's son, daughter. Can we talk about things?
Yeah.
And don't just talk about this topic, talk about things in general. As a family, how should we be? Should we eat together? Should we do things in the house? Should we smile at each other?
Right.
Should we sit together for a few minutes to see how our day was?
Yeah.
You have to start simple. If you just attack the instrument that is the reason of your, if you like, discord, you will probably come head to head against a person who's got a very strong ego.
Yeah, and to kind of bring it back full circle or tie it to other past episodes, I know we've had a number of speakers, guests on the show, and some speakers have even gone so far as to say the very, I'll say, stereotypical time as to when we talk with our children around the dinner table.
Yeah.
Right. It's a trope in itself. Well, oh, hey, honey, how was your day? Hey, so and so, Khalid. Hey, Fatima, how was your day? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, it was good. That's the typical response you'll get. Yeah, nom nom, it was good. Whereas the suggestion was that if you connect with your child before going to bed, hey, how was your day? Like, tell me a little bit more about it. Yeah, they'll open up to you. I do that with my own kids.
I found, Brother Mushtaq, if you describe your day, if you take the lead, as I was saying right at the beginning, become the person you want your child to be.
Yes.
I have not asked this person who questioned this, how often does the child see a phone in your hand? How often is it the case that people are distracted by digital devices in addition to him or her?
Right.
Child has not taken this from nowhere. This usually is a hand-me-down, with all politeness.
Yeah.
If we are seeing in our homes people that say sorry, people that have made it a point to sit and spend 5 minutes with our spouse, the child sees that.
Yeah.
The son and the daughter is directly visualizing what is norm in the house.
Right.
But if everybody comes home and even on the dinner table, people have got their devices, like I've got my device right there, it's sending a message to the child, hey, this will take over the moment there is any activity here. So yes, I'm giving you attention, but please remember it's conditional.
Yeah.
And the conditional activity is, if this goes, many people don't even say, I'm sorry, can I please check my phone? They actually completely ignore the person who's sitting in front of them and start to pay attention. I would politely remind everybody, children in particular, young people in general, will take very strongly to what you do versus what you say. Please pay attention to that point.
Good point. Producer Kashif, more questions, please.
Yeah, I think the person that asked that question was just giving some clarifications and the exact scenario of what happened. But I think it's too much to address on this podcast. I encourage them to reach out, and maybe we could set up a session with Dr. Rashid separately for all those specifics. I don't know if I read this comment out loud. It was saying, decided to watch Dr. Zaihan's podcast after a very moving Jummah khutbah this week. This session has been very impactful for our household already. May Allah bless you all for hosting it. And then it was a question that came in on the text, so I won't be able to display it on the screen. But the question was asking, in order to connect with and I'm paraphrasing here, in order to connect with our children, is it a good idea to sort of tell them about our past sins and our past mistakes? And So that was the
Oh,
question.
really good question.
So, Jazakallah khair, very relevant question. Past sins in general are discouraged by all scholars. In general, the assumption, the I shouldn't say assumption, the implication is that we accept that we were not perfect. We are not perfect now.
Mhm.
We also accept that we have been forgetful of what happened. And some of it, as I often hear from people close to me, that I have a selective memory. That is true. You are actually not encouraged to mention or discuss what Allah has hidden. The implication is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of his name is Al-Sattar, which means the one who makes sitr, the one who hides.
Hmm.
So one can draw broad lessons to say, when I wasted my time at a time when I could have been doing useful things, I suffered the consequence. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Or when I didn't pay attention to what my father and my mother were saying because I considered my own opinion to be more, I did find that my parents were actually giving good advice. I think that kind of general connotation allows the young person to see much more into recognition. And as I've said before, if we've made mistakes, and we all have, I know I have made many mistakes.
Mm.
If a child or a young person asks a question, I start to respond. Halfway through the question, I realize he was actually already right, and I'm arguing for no reason. I think it's a huge lesson in learning practical advice where the father is able to say, I am sorry, you were actually right. I have actually discovered something I did not know.
Right.
Can I congratulate you for pointing me in the right direction? Can I also say that I'm so grateful to have you as my son or my daughter or my wife, that you are constantly, regularly fine-tuning me. I don't think I would have ever have thought of these questions that you have because of your intelligence and because of your age. One of the things that Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, you hear that the young and older Sahaba did not separate. They
Right.
used to spend company with each other. Well, what is that when Abdullah bin Abbas was sitting in front of the Prophet ﷺ on a camel, and the Prophet ﷺ says, Ihfadallah ya fadik, protect Allah Ta'ala's rights and he will protect you.
Mm.
What in fact is happening? An older teacher is advising a person who's not even a teenager. And this teenager then grows up to be one of the most powerful scholars of Islam.
Mm.
So we should not underestimate our children's ability to learn and learn from their mistakes and learn for our mistakes without making the mistakes obvious to say, oh, son, yes, I used to throw, stuff at my neighbor's window. Obviously, this is not the kind of thing I would advertise. But I did tell my youngsters that one time I was running after a kite in Lahore, in Pakistan, where I grew up, and I fell into a ditch because I was too distracted by what I was doing. So they had a good laugh, but they also realized, you know what? Dad was a regular guy. And
That's
I
it.
said at 10,
That's it.
you didn't think of those things that one day I'll be sitting on a podcast explaining to people and people will be saying, MashaAllah, what good piece of knowledge. I've made my own mistakes. I'm not
Yes.
going to admit them on YouTube.
Right.
I'm just going to say I've learned. I hope all of us are in this journey.
Mm. Really good, really good, and very relatable. Alhamdulillah. Producer Kashif, more questions or comments for that matter?
Yes, I was just looking at the ones that came in through Instagram.
Mhm.
So I think most of them we've answered. How to connect with teens and protect them from destructive lifestyle or mistakes. So I think that was very similar to the university one we talked about. The other one was in one video you said love should not be for should be for humans, not devices. Please provide ways to switch children love from device to people. So I think we talked about that a little bit also.
I just want to point out something here, Brother Kashif. One thing I do find parents in an attempt to get their children's, if you like, obedience, they sometimes end up embarrassing children. Embarrassing meaning they are made to be aware of their mistakes in front of people, where it becomes a very destructive thing for the child's self-esteem. And not only that, but it could potentially shake their confidence into doing the right thing, especially if they are publicly embarrassed for it.
Right.
So I would just advise myself and all of us, advising people of mistakes should be done privately. It should be done discreetly. It should be done that the Prophet ﷺ's hadith, where it says, a mu'min should not hurt another mu'min. A believer should not hurt another believer by his hands or his tongue. So our children are also mu'mineen. Our children are also believers. And they deserve just as much respect when it comes to self-esteem. And so I would say that if confidence, and I believe in these three terms very much, confidence develops creativity, which allows character. So if
Okay.
you can develop the three
All right.
C's, these are the things that I have believed from a scholar that I listen to a lot, that confidence develops from the child being a self-esteem being nurtured in the house, meaning not undue pampering, but encouragement. I'm much against praising. I'm very much against praising. I'm very much differ against the Western narrative where we are told praise your children. Praising can introduce an element of takabbur in the child, arrogance in the child. And it's sadly our children's nafs, our children's soul is not bereft of being taken over by shayateen's influences. So parents definitely should encourage. Parents definitely should thank. Parents definitely should appreciate.
Yes.
Parents definitely should make it certain that the child realizes that the parents have been very encouraged by what he has done, and even give them hadiya, prize. But once a child's progress is tied to prizes, now what you're doing is you're seriously affecting the niyyah, the intention of that child. Because I've seen parents who give their children gifts for going for fajr to the masjid. This is an extremely bad idea. This can influence the child's niyyah, intention. And once niyyah is messed up, it's very difficult to correct it, because the child is now doing good for the sake of that prize, not for the sake of pleasing Allah. So I just want to remind myself and my audience, please be careful when it comes to your children's training. Inshallah, another time I intend to go over, we have a webinar planned in October, where I intend to go over all the things that mess up a child's confidence and potentially affects his creativity, which long-term might affect his character. So watch out for that podcast or that webinar, inshallah, in October.
Oh, great. Okay. Great advice. Solid advice. Producer Kashif.
So inshallah, the final question for now, that's here is, what to do when husband and wife don't agree on parenting philosophy and decisions?
Oh, okay. Another really good question.
This is a big Pandora's box. And,
yeah. So take your time.
It is a very relevant question,
Yes.
of course. Parenting should never be underestimated as the most important job in the world. Again and again, and I learned that secondarily, that the amount of time we give our professional careers, a lot of the time is much more than the time we spend in parenting techniques. Parenting workshops are very under-attended. People would ask for questions about problems, but unfortunately, very few are proactively seeking the right behavior to say, yes, I have a relation, but do I have a relationship? Yes, this is my biological child, but have me and my wife, the two, if you like, as I call Ammi Abu University, mom and dad's university, as that university got credentialing, has it actually got accredited information to say this is the right way to parent and this is not the right way to parent?
Right.
This is a project that needs to be getting us to our ultimate destination, Jannah. We all want to be on the same flight to paradise.
Right.
I don't want my husband, my wife, or my children to be left behind somewhere or be stopped by immigration to say, no, sorry, sir, you don't have the right visa here. Your passport is expired. We don't want that stuff to happen when we're going to Jannah. So why would we take parenting then unseriously? So the fact that we have different philosophies, different ideas is very human.
Right.
I might have been brought up in a house where my father was very strict. My wife might have been brought up in a house where there were 10 kids. Everybody was doing their own thing. So I cannot in reality expect to come together one day in this rishta, in this relation, and find, oh, yes, we agree on everything. No, you won't agree on everything. And I would say it's almost, I think it's hindsight more than foresight, but we need to be proactive. We need to be looking far ahead in the future to say, honey, these children are the ones we want us leaving behind for Sadqa Jariyah. The Prophet ﷺ, as you know, has said children that are left behind that are good will be continuous charity for you. Well, if you're differing in parenting, perhaps you've not really thought of that hadith. Perhaps it's not come to my mind that parenting by itself is a full-time task.
Yes.
Parenting is not something you do on the side. Like I said earlier, when we outsource parenting, what are we really saying? Right. Why don't you, Mr. Maulana, Mr. Uncle, Mr. Teacher, use your magic wand and create this child into qurrata a'yun, the coolness of my eyes? But that's implying that hard work is not needed.
Yeah.
But this task is probably the most likely the one that gets me to my chosen destination. How often have we not bought a ticket and thought we'll just arrive at the airport? How often have we not checked out the location where we're going to say, honey, and whatever you call your husband, what are we going to do when we get there? So here we are parenting for the sake of getting Allah to forgive us, and we don't have a plan. So to answer the question, there is nothing wrong with having different opinions about parenting. What is a problem is if these opinions are emotional based. They're not based on knowledge. They're not based on studying. They're not based on workshops. They're not based on authentic scholarship, but they're just based on what I saw happen when I was little. That, I'm sorry, sister and my brother, is not an authentic way to create a powerful legacy for yourself and your children.
Right.
We have to put time into that is
Yeah.
the simple answer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess the subset of that question would definitely be then, what happens if there's a constant clash?
And there will be, without knowledge, I can guarantee that there will be a clash. And that's where it comes to what's called adabul ikhtilaf, that we agree to disagree. We love each other despite the disagreements we have. So I would politely mention, if in a relationship disagreement doesn't occur, then one person is probably spineless. That's most likely what's happened. Or the other person is my way or the highway. You do my thing or you leave. If this is the attitude, the relationship will continue with resentment in the background. Likely it will fail. But if a relationship is what's called authentic, then there is difference of opinion. There's conversation. There's called shura bainahum. There is consultation. The Prophet ﷺ, Sahaba, the best of Sahaba, Abu Bakr and Umar.
Yes.
Who is Abu Bakr? The Prophet ﷺ said, I can never pay off Abu Bakr. I have literally compensated everybody for what they did for me, but not Abu Bakr. And Umar, he said, radiallahu anh, he said, if there was going to be a prophet after me, it would be Umar. So now these are two giants that are disagreeing about what should be done with the prisoners of Badr.
Yes.
Big disagreement, not small disagreement. One saying, wipe them out. They have done bad stuff. The other one is saying, Ya Rasulullah, forgive them. They might become powerful Muslims in the future. I would say that's a huge difference of opinion.
For sure.
And this is not the only time. So if we see very powerful, upright figures having a different opinion, why don't me and you have a problem with different opinion? What do we want? People that just become doormats? I don't think we do. Or do we want people that stand up between us and getting to Allah's forgiveness? I don't think that's a good idea either. So I would answer that question. I'm sorry, it sounds more like a speech.
No.
But really don't be scared of difference of opinion. Difference of opinion indicates that you are both alive and both have the ability to have a decent conversation and yet love each other unconditionally.
Okay, so let's take this a step further.
Sure.
So just entertain me here. Bear with me. I think so. With that difference of opinion, but then how can parents, husband and wife, get to a level of understanding that this is the plan for our child when it comes to their tarbiyah, their upbringing, character, education, if there are constant clashes?
So I would say increase your knowledge.
Okay.
Don't be shy.
Okay.
Look at the methodology of what was done. There's a very good book called The Children Around the Prophet by Hisham al-Awadi. Children Around the Prophet by Hisham al-Awadi.
Okay.
There's a book called Nurturing Iman in Children by Aisha Hamdan.
All right.
There are other books. So one is increasing knowledge.
Got it.
Two is not being shy of asking questions from people that you trust, like your parents, like your aunts, like your uncles, like your friends, like your neighbors, like your teachers. There's nothing to be lost by asking a white cross mixture. How did you deal with things?
Yeah.
What things did you find a difficulty? Brother Mushtaq, one of the things I find as immigrant communities, and I'm one of them, is what we've lost is that huge circle of what a village used to bring up a child.
Definitely.
So when that doesn't exist, there is this one-to-one tussle constantly in the house because we've just assumed, hey, I'm right and he's wrong, and the other way around. And we don't realize our children are watching this World War III.
That's it.
That's not a healthy atmosphere for children to learn from.
That's it, exactly.
Much better would be to say, honey, we are learning also. Thank you so much for coming in the world so we have had a chance to fine-tune our brain. What's wrong with having that learning attitude? Say, I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
I've made mistakes before. Likely I'll make mistakes now.
100%.
You know where this is coming from? This idea of perfection. It should be like a movie. And I keep telling people, your life and my life is not a movie. Because that will mean there are some heroes and villains, and that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
That's a bad idea to place your family into a villain category.
Yeah.
And to elevate somewhere where they don't belong.
Right.
Much better would be to say, you know what? we are learning. We didn't do any courses. We never went to even a single weekend course before we became mom and dad. But now we are one.
Yeah.
And we have to learn.
Yeah.
And we have to agree that we have a lot of difference of opinion. But you know what? We're not going to give it up.
Yeah.
Because the Prophet ﷺ said, the harder the task, the higher its prize.
Yes.
So think of life like that. You and me are trying to get to Jannah. We are trying to get to the highest Jannah. Parenting is one of your tasks that will get you there.
Okay, well said. Well said. Well said. And I'm just going to do a quick time check. So 4 minutes at the top of the hour. Producer Kashif, any more questions? Because I think Dr. Zaihan kind of has really put a nice bow on all the entire episode.
Yeah, no more questions. Alhamdulillah, we're good there.
All right. Well then, Dr. Zaihan, thank you as always. Truly from the bottom of all our hearts. Those watching and those that will watch and those that continue to watch.
Just
it's
ask
always
the audience to please make dua for me and you.
Absolutely. Well said. And on that, I'll end the podcast. Do continue to write in topics, ideas, questions. You can always get a hold of Producer Kashif. Do continue to watch this channel. Spread the word on the channel. Alhamdulillah, Producer Kashif and Brother Kaysar, one of the other co-founders of the Happy Strong Family team, is always mentioning within our group that we've reached so many views and so many likes and all of that widely watched and distributed. We're simply doing this just to spread the word. We're simply doing this as our own means of sadaqah jariyah, which is why Dr. Zaihan has asked that you all pray for us. So that we can have some goodness enter the world. So I'll leave it at that. Watch, tune in, and watch often. Jazakallah khair. This is Brother Mushtaq signing off.